The Power Rangers, noble protectors of Earth and beyond, bold heroes who wear matching uniforms and usually carry some sort of standard kit of gear and often report to a larger organization that has oversight over them. Guys, are Power Rangers cops? Like, they're superheroes, they're definitely all superheroes, but there are different origins and backgrounds for every single Power Rangers team, and sometimes those drift a little too much to organized law enforcement for my taste. Unfortunately, the question of are Power Rangers cops isn't really a simple one to answer because, as I just said, every team is different. But fortunately, I love complicated questions about pop culture stuff, and so today we are going to answer exactly that. Through extensive research, I have determined a definitive ranking of which Power Rangers teams are the most and least cops. And some of the answers on there might surprise you. I can tell you, because I'm recording this intro after the video's done, some of them surprised me. I feel like I say this in every video on this channel, but we have a lot of ground to cover, and so let's go ahead and get started. This video is going to be largely divided into two parts. First off, I am going to go through every team in chronological release order, give a little bit of background about what I found. Then, once we've established all of those, we're going to loop back around and give you that final list of everything. We're going to be analyzing the organizational structure of the team, their powers, their villains, anything that might be relevant, and we have 23 teams to get through. So without further ado, let's jump right into the original Mighty Morphin Power Rangers. Most of these summaries are going to be pretty quick, and especially with Mighty Morphin, I'm gonna assume we all have a baseline idea of how this team was chosen. Zordon, an alien from Eltar, needed some people to fight off Rita Repulsa, and so he made the somewhat questionable choice of teenagers with attitude. One thing you'll see me coming back to a lot in this video is a scale, an imaginary scale of course, between cop and superhero, and MMPR fits very much more on the vigilante side of that scale. They don't really work for a larger organization. They have Zordon, sure, but he's more of a guy in the chair mentor type figure along with Alpha 5. Plus, the team was chosen individually. They weren't trained to become Rangers before receiving the power like we will see with teams later on this list. So all of this pushes them far away from cops. They don't really have any of the signifiers of that I'm looking for. However, is there a larger discussion to be had about Zordon basically employing child soldiers to fight his war? Yeah, that's something we could talk about, but that is not the topic of today's video. Thank God. And that concerning pattern will keep up for a couple of shows because the first several Power Ranger teams are all directly connected. In fact, they're basically the same team with a shifting roster, but still one flowed directly into the other. There is one little exception to this pattern, that being the Mighty Morphin Alien Rangers who took the role of Earth's main team between Mighty Morphin and Zeo for a very brief period of time. The thing is, we don't really know much about their actual history. We know they're from the planet Aquitar, they have a good relationship with Zordon, and presumably they operate similar to MMPR, but that's not 100% confirmed. Given the lack of information on them, and the fact that Zordon quite literally calls them in as backup when the main team is indisposed and cannot fight, for the final ranking at the end of this video, I'm just gonna put them in close proximity to the other Zordon-era teams. That seems fair enough, and I'm not sure what else to do. Thus we get to Power Rangers Zeo. The original power coins that Zordon gave the Rangers were destroyed, and instead they picked up these Zeo crystals and became a new team with new looks, but still the same core concept. So we can kind of go fast through this. I guarantee you that in the final ranking, MMPR and Zeo will be right next to each other because they are basically the same. It's just one uses coins and one uses crystals. Either way, they are more like vigilante superheroes outside of larger organization than law enforcement. Power Rangers Turbo, though, this is the first one that we're going to need to have a little bit of discussion about. Now, the core team of Turbo Rangers is once again a continuation of the previous one. The Zeo powers no longer worked. That's actually a larger discussion, but for purposes of today, the Zeo powers no longer worked, and so the Turbo powers were used instead. They are not law enforcement. For the third time, they are the same team continuing. But they have an ally by the name of Blue Centurion. And just take a look at this man. Blue Centurion is a robotic police officer from the future, and everything about this man just screams cop. Like, the mere presence of Blue Centurion in Power Rangers Turbo, I guarantee you is going to knock them down in the rankings. Are they still independent vigilantes? Yes, they are, but there is clear and present collaboration with law enforcement at the very least. And hey, if you're working too closely with the cops, you might as well be one of them. I know we're going very quickly through the Zordon era here, and we'll spend more time on individual teams as they start to diverge, but next we have Power Rangers in Space. In Space is a little bit different than the previous ones because Zordon is less present. This team is instead assembled by an alien named Andros, and to be fair, Andros did get his set of morphers which he gives to the other Rangers from Zordon, so Zordon's presence still looms large over the series, and he is an important figure going forward. But regardless of that, where the team gets the powers is less important than how they use them, and in that regard, I would definitely argue that In Space acts less like cops than even Mighty Morphin did. The reason for this is pretty simple. For the previous three teams, Zordon was a guiding force. He was a mentor that was not actively in the field, and In Space doesn't really have anything like that. Their leader is their Red Ranger, who is fighting with them in the spaceship as they go on their quests. I think this makes them a lot more like a classic Western superhero team than anything else, because they really are just a bunch of independent heroes going around and doing their thing, closer to the Avengers than Mighty Morphin was. So at this point in the video, hopefully you can kind of see the sorts of criteria that we're going to be looking at, and now we get to the final team of the Zordon era, Lost Galaxy. This is where the video format's really going to hit its stride because it's where things start diverging. The first 4 shows are all directly part of one storyline, and while this is still connected to it, Lost Galaxy is far more independent. The Lost Galaxy Rangers protect a human space colony named Terra Venture. Now, you might think that this would set them up to be cops because they are protecting like a specific spaceship and society, but weirdly, despite the concept being very sci-fi, their powers are strangely rooted in magic. Rather than being given their powers by some sort of authority like we've seen so far, this is the first team that gets them through magical designation. The Lost Galaxy Rangers are empowered by the Quasar Sabers, and they have a sort of Excalibur sword in the stone thing going on where they have wielders who are destined to use them. As far as I'm aware, there is no sort of ritual where a police officer has to pull their badge out of a rock to be designated as a cop, so this sets Lost Galaxy very far away from that designation in any sense. Lost Galaxy continues this pattern even after getting their abilities because there is a military on Terra Venture, but Lost Galaxy isn't a part of them. That makes this the first team to not necessarily work against a government organization, but to exist actively in the presence of one and yet not work with them directly, which I do think solidly puts Lost Galaxy farthest away from being police officers, of the Zordon era at least. So now we exit the Zordon era, and from this point on, all bets are off. Rangers can come from anywhere, and so the point of this video gets a lot more difficult to discuss. And oh boy, the next team is going to make that discussion difficult for sure, because we are talking about Lightspeed Rescue. And there's a good reason why this one's a little bit harder to parse. Lightspeed Rescue is a division of the United States military. You would think that this might make it easy. They are officially, canonically part of the US military. That's close enough, they're cops. But it's way more nuanced than that. First off, let's take a look at the villains that Lightspeed Rescue was assembled to deal with. It's not an invading alien empire, it's not a bunch of sentient robots. Their villains are demons, like literal, actual, straight-up demons from the underworld. They're not even paraphrased or called something different for sensitive audiences in the early 2000s. Their villains are openly called demons in the show. And you know, the topic of where and how the military should be deployed is a very complex and sensitive one. But in this case, I don't think we have to get complex. If there are literal, actual hell demons attacking a city, that's a reasonable case to use military force. Doesn't make them not cops, but it is a point in Lightspeed Rescue's favor. The bigger point in their favor is the team's roster and how it was run, though. Let's take a look at Lightspeed Rescue's Red Ranger, Carter Grayson. He is their field leader. He was appointed by the military. Who do you think they chose for this very important role? Was it a police officer? Was it a soldier? No, they chose a firefighter. And I would argue that is the most correct choice. Physically capable, good in a crisis, trained to save people and minimize damage rather than punishing or arresting criminals. Like, if I had to choose a career to give superpowers to, firefighter has to be top of the list, right? And the rest of the team follows suit. There's a paramedic, great, a lifeguard, great, and then the other two are a pilot and an extreme sports enthusiast, which are less public servant jobs, but still. Even Lightspeed Rescue's mentor figure, Captain Mitchell, is still pretty good. Yes, he is a member of the military very actively, but you know what he was before that? Also a firefighter, so I cannot complain. There is one other military member who shows up in the show, a general who is Captain Mitchell's superior officer, and you know what his one contribution is? He tries to replace the compassionate, ineffective human rangers with robots, and then the robots go awry, and so the rangers have to beat them, and then the general apologizes and leaves and never shows up again. So with all the evidence considered, despite technically being a military org, Lightspeed Rescue are not cops. I mean, maybe the name made this obvious to people right from the start, but they are not treated like law enforcement, they are treated like crisis response. Look, at this point, I think it's obvious that I'm willing to do a video where cops are kind of the butt of the joke, but I will be damned if I let firefighters catch a stray. We love you guys, so Lightspeed Rescue is in the clear. So at this point, I mean, we're several teams into the video, and we have not had a single one that qualifies as cops. Maybe this entire thing was kind of pointless if there's not going to be any, oh, it's Time Force next. Look, far be it from me to say that Time Force is a bad series, it's actually a very good one, but these Rangers are just straight up police officers. Like, Time Force? That's not just a catchy name, it is the law enforcement agency that they work for. The implications of this organization are wild. First off, they are time-traveling police officers, and the mere concept of that existing is already scary. Secondly, in the year 3000 where they are based, it is stated that they have captured all criminals and eliminated all crime. And while that sounds great on the surface, when you think about it, I feel like there's no way that can be done ethically. Also, their villains are minorities. Like, there's no nicer way to say that, it's just true. The main group that Time Force fights is simply known as the Mutants, and yes, a lot of them are evil, but it's also explicitly stated that A, they were created by human scientific experimentation, and B, once they were created, they were despised and hated by humanity for their hideous appearances, and that is what drove a lot of them to lives of crime. The leader of this group is named Ransik, and like, I'm not gonna say that Ransik is good or his actions are justified in any way, but also, he is leading a group of criminals that are basically just disfigured people who turned to crime because they were shunned by society. I mean, that's an uncomfortable topic. And if you think that they use this to, like, make a statement at the end of the show, no, Ransik is the one who has to examine his own prejudices. In the final episode, he basically has a moment where he realizes maybe humans aren't so bad after all, and then he willingly turns himself in, and the Time Force Rangers send him to a prison where he is cryogenically frozen for who knows how long. Oh yeah, that's how they hold criminals. They put them in cryostasis forever. It's also definitely worth mentioning that this entire mission we see in the show was unsanctioned by the organization. These Rangers were not supposed to travel back in time to catch Ransik. They do that by stealing their morphers and then just going rogue. I don't know if that makes it better or worse. I feel like worse. So yeah, Time Force, definitely 100% beyond a shadow of a doubt cops. Now, am I playing them up a little bit for the bit? Yeah, I will admit that. Ransik is, again, horrible, he wants to take over the planet, etc., etc. But still, the fact remains that the Time Force Rangers are time-traveling rogue police officers, and we cannot let that slide. Now we're going to swing way back in the other direction with Power Rangers Wild Force. While the word force in Time Force was referring to their organization, in this team's case, it basically just means power again, like the force of the wild. They aren't an established law enforcement organization. They get their abilities from what is essentially nature magic. In fact, Wild Force stands out among Ranger teams because they are one of the few that get their powers from their Zords, not the other way around. And who do they fight with this nature magic? Pollution, basically. The Wild Force Rangers fight orgs, which are the sentient embodiments of pollution brought to life and now attacking the planet. That's not law enforcement. That sounds to me more like, as wild as this is to say, environmental conservation through violence. Hell yeah! Conceptually, Wild Force rules. They have one job, it's a job that no one has any ethical concerns with whatsoever, and they do it well, so I have absolutely no problem with them not cops. These last two have been very easy. Time Force, cops, Wild Force, not cops. But the next team, Power Rangers Ninja Storm, that one has a little bit more to discuss. These Ninja Rangers are ninjas, obviously, and they also use elemental magic in addition to their ranger abilities, so this could kind of go either way so far. Their villains also don't provide a ton of insight, it's just an evil ninja and then a group of space criminals. The elemental magic thing especially at first made me categorize them way more towards the superhero side of things than the cop side, but then I remembered that the Ninja Storm Rangers are trained at a specific academy. We don't know a lot about the origins of these ninja academies, the show never really goes into it, but we know there are at least 2 of them, probably more, and they are specifically made to train, quote, Earth's protectors. This could again kind of go either way, but the thing that tipped the scales for me is the fact that these schools seem to have pretty wide enrollment. The 3 core Ninja Storm Rangers that we see are not the only students of these academies, they are just the ones that escaped when the main villain kidnapped all of the other students. And taking it a step further, that main villain, Lothar, is an ex-ninja himself. He trained at one of the academies, but then was kicked out from it, losing his ninja rank and status in the process. And if that rank is something that can be stripped from you, it implies that there's a hierarchy. This means that objectively, the Ninja Storm Rangers are trained agents who studied at a designated academy, which is part of a larger law enforcement and protection organization. Guys, I think the Ninja Storm Rangers are cops, actually. The one thing that they are missing is that they don't seem to work with any sort of government. They are by all accounts an independent organization, but we also don't know for sure that they don't have government connections. Like I said, the origin of these academies is something of a lore blind spot. But yeah, with the information in front of me, that's enough that I'm gonna count this team as cops, and this does extend to the Thunder Rangers as well. Technically, within the universe, they are a different team of Rangers, but this only goes to prove my point further because it confirms that these academies do operate with a larger hierarchy, and it's not just one team of superheroes. This one caught me off guard, I'll be honest. I went into this video pretty much knowing what my conclusions for most of the teams would be, but Ninja Storm did change my mind during the research process. I think my reasoning is sound, though. Oh, now we're definitively back in superhero territory, though, with Power Rangers Dino Thunder. Out of all the Ranger teams, this one is maybe the closest to the classic Western superhero. The Marvel inspiration is very clear in Dino Thunder. Tommy Oliver is back, he has a doctorate now, and he has been working on experiments with dinosaur DNA. Thus, he and his Ranger team are empowered by these things called the Dino Gems, which are basically a pseudo-magic, pseudo-science dinosaur crystals that give whoever bonds to them superpowers. And superpowers is absolutely the right term, because beyond just their typical Ranger tech and morphing abilities, the Dino Thunder Rangers have independent superhuman abilities that they can use whether they're morphed or not. And who's their villain? Well, it's Tommy Oliver's old scientific partner who infused himself with dinosaur DNA, turned himself into a dinosaur man named Mesogog, and then got an army of cyborg dinosaur soldiers called, what are they called? Dinotrons? It's not Dinotrons. It's something stupid like that, though. Tyrannodrones. Wow, I almost want to leave that clip in. You know what? Yeah, I am going to leave that clip in because that was an unedited cut of me legitimately forgetting the name of the Dino Thunder minions and then looking it up really quick. And I think the discovery of the name Tyrannodrones really exemplifies how much of a Western comic book this series is. Like, come on, the Dino Thunder Rangers operate out of a hidden science lab, they have independent Avengers-style superpowers, and their main villain is a scientist who accidentally infused himself with dinosaur DNA and turned into a monster. They are basically Spider-Man characters. Like, Dino Thunder are the most superhero-y out of all the Rangers, not cops. And you know, I'm starting to see a pattern here, I'm sure a coincidental one, but it seems like during this era, the Ranger teams would flip back and forth in each series from cops and not cops, because coming on the heels of Dino Thunder, we have Power Rangers SPD. And look at them. These are the police-themed Rangers. Yeah, Time Force was also a Ranger team that was a law enforcement organization, but the series was more time travel themed than anything else. These guys are cops, and that's the point. The SPD Rangers are part of a law enforcement organization. That's what SPD is. It does not stand for Space Police Department, as I have seen people say before, though. It stands for Space Patrol Delta, because they had to make it more sci-fi. In fact, their organizational structure is so well established that SPD is one of the few Ranger teams in which the color actually means something. Usually, a Ranger's color is totally arbitrary. If you want more details on how that works, you can go check out another video I did on how Power Ranger abilities function, but in SPD's case, the color is directly tied to the Ranger's rank. There are multiple Ranger teams within the org of Space Patrol Delta, and within each squad, the Red Ranger is the leader, the Blue Ranger is the second in command, Green is the third, and so on, and these can fluctuate if the rank of the members changes. We see this in the show. At the end of SPD, the first Red Ranger, Jack, ends up leaving, and then the Blue Ranger, Sky, gets promoted to his job, and he appears as the Red Ranger in future episodes. The theming of SPD as cops is so incredibly obvious, I don't even really need to explain it further, because to explain it, I could just point at anything and everything in the show. But there is one more thing we need to address before I move on, and that is that, shockingly, SPD actually acknowledges police corruption as a topic. The Rangers that we follow in the show are known as SPD B Squad. They are not the top Rangers within Space Patrol Delta. Those would be, obviously, A Squad. And the reason we're following B Squad instead of A is that the A Squad Rangers disappear at the beginning of the series. We find out later where A Squad went, and they didn't just go missing, they actively defected to the side of the villains. And not because of any classic Power Rangers Evil Ranger trope like mind control or a curse, they just did it because they wanted to. It is stated within the show that the A Squad Rangers left to join the fascist emperor because they, quote, wanted to be on the winning team, and that is the only reason given. They are openly corrupt cops, and there's no more nuance to them. They don't even get redeemed at the end of the series. These Rangers are actively just bad people who abuse their police power for their own ends. Part of me is amazed that Power Rangers of all shows was willing to tackle this as a B-plot, but then again, SPD does have a reputation of being one of the better written shows, so maybe I shouldn't be surprised. Now, with that said, the SPD Rangers are absolutely still cops, like I said a minute ago. That is the point of the series, so nothing can change that fact. But they earn some points back because SPD as an organization clearly cares about and deals with the issue of police corruption. So yeah, good for them. And after SPD, the pendulum swings back in the other direction. Part of me is starting to wonder if this flip between cop and not cop was somewhat intentional because of how consistent it is. Now we are at Mystic Force. Mystic Force is a bunch of wizards, and their main villain is an elder god who wants to plunge the universe into infinite darkness that he can rule over for all of eternity. Not cops. I love Mystic Force, it's one of my favorite shows, but this is gonna be like the fastest segment in this video because the Mystic Force Rangers are as close to police officers as your standard Dungeons & Dragons party is. I've been referencing this made-up scale of cop to superhero throughout the whole video. Mystic Force isn't even really on it. There's like a bubble outside of the scale that says warrior wizard or something, and that's where Mystic Force is. And we're done. I wasn't kidding about this being the shortest section. There's nothing else to say. Mystic Force is just kind of their own thing. Though speaking of teams which are more their own thing, Operation Overdrive. This one is weird, because the Operation Overdrive Rangers are privately funded by a billionaire. This team is started by a guy named Andrew Hartford, who is best described as basically a combination of Tony Stark and Indiana Jones. During one of his archaeological expeditions, which was basically just a treasure hunting mission, Andrew uncovers part of an ancient magical crown and also unleashes the monsters who are trying to get their hands on it. Then the protector of that ancient crown essentially tells him, hey, it is your fault that these monsters are back out in the world, so now you have to find the pieces of the crown before they can. So then he invents the Operation Overdrive Ranger tech and assembles the team just to fix his own mistake. So does this make them cops? No, not really. Plus, they disband after their singular purpose is done. But there definitely needs to be a little footnote there of privately funded Ranger team, because that is really kind of strange. As for Hartford's personal ethics, he seems like a nice enough guy, but we don't know too much about his history, so I cannot speak to how exactly he became a billionaire in the first place. But in the case of the Rangers, he is using his wealth to solve a problem that he caused, so I can't really take issue with that. Also, the red Operation Overdrive Ranger is a robot that Andrew created to be his son because he had no other family. That's not really relevant to today's topic at hand, but I've learned from experience that if you mention Operation Overdrive without acknowledging the fact that Mac Hartford was a robot, people will yell at you for quote-unquote forgetting it. So here's that, just for you guys. Now we're going to return to some themes that we talked about a little bit earlier with Power Rangers Ninja Storm, because Power Rangers Jungle Fury shares the same element of a sort of martial arts academy. On the surface, Jungle Fury and Ninja Storm share a lot of similarities. Both of the teams are martial arts users who are magically empowered in one way or another and trained by a dedicated academy. In Jungle Fury's case, a group known as the Order of the Claw. So you might expect that I would classify this team as kinda weirdly cops like I did with Ninja Storm, but there's a key difference that changes my thinking because we know the origin of the Jungle Fury Academy. The Order of the Claw came into existence because of an ancient evil spirit named Dai Shi, who you might recognize if you know Jungle Fury because that's also the name of the main villain. Way back in olden days, a group of warriors used a martial art called Pai Shui to defeat Dai Shi and imprison him underground, and then they made the Order of the Claw specifically so that there would be warriors ready if Dai Shi ever escaped his imprisonment. So yes, the Jungle Fury Rangers were trained at an academy run by a specific organization, but less in a law enforcement way, and more in such a way that every generation has a certain group of warriors dedicated to protecting Earth from a specific ancient evil. Now granted, even though Daishi is defeated once and for all at the end of the show, the Order of the Claw does still continue, but I don't know, they feel more like an ancient order of monks than any type of police officer to me, so I'm gonna say they're good. This means the pattern of flipping back and forth between cop and not cop has been broken. We've had a bunch of special case teams and groups that don't really fit directly on one side of the scale or the other in the last few. But the next one, they definitely fit on the scale, maybe the polar opposite of SPD in fact, because Power Rangers RPM is the only Power Rangers team that actively fights the government. RPM takes place in an alternate universe which has been destroyed by a sentient AI who was made by a shady government organization and then gained self-awareness and went rogue. The group that made this virus was known as Alphabet Soup. They did a whole bunch of bad stuff in the name of military experimentation, including kidnapping children on multiple occasions. And again, they are definitely a government organization. This is not a fan theory, it is confirmed within the show. One of the kidnapped children, though an adult at the time of the show, Dr. K, is also the one who created the Ranger tech that the RPM Rangers use. She escapes the Alphabet Soup facility with her gear and then assembles the team as a way to atone for her past and take down the AI that she contributed to. Now, Alphabet Soup is annihilated by the robots pretty quickly after this happens, so it's not like they're a present evil group within the series, but still, the RPM Rangers do work under a government defector using stolen military technology, and they do get legitimized a bit more later in the series, but they get legitimized because they're working with the government of the last surviving city in the apocalypse to protect the residents of that city. They are definitely not cops, they are independent vigilantes. They don't work directly against the military in the show because again, post-apocalypse, everyone kind of working for the same goal, but they are never part of them either. The best way I can describe their relationship is kind of like Batman and the Gotham City Police Department. The military is aware of RPM and they will call Dr. K if they need help, but the Rangers are never officially part of the government in any capacity. Now we move on not only to the next series, but the next era of Power Rangers as a whole with Power Rangers Samurai. Though for our purposes today, this is going to be a really quick one because the lore of Power Rangers Samurai and Jungle Fury is basically identical. In ancient times, a bunch of evil monsters from a spirit world tried to invade the Earth, and some Rangers fought them off, and then passed their power down through the generations so that when those monsters ever returned, there would be heroes left to fight them off. The biggest difference is that Samurai is probably a little bit less like cops than Jungle Fury, because rather than being an academy that trains new students every generation, the Samurai powers are passed down through ancestry. Their gear and magic is managed by the descendants of an ancient clan of Japanese warriors. Yes, the extremely white man on your screen right now is the descendant of an ancient clan of Japanese warriors. Samurai had some problems, which is the other reason I'm kind of skimming over it quickly here. Are the Samurai Rangers cops? No. Do the Samurai Rangers have some casting problems? Yes. Yes, they definitely do. Let's move on. Oh, and now we're at Power Rangers Megaforce. Yay, fun. And by yay fun, I mean bad, and I don't want to talk about it, but I have to because that's what the video's about. Power Rangers Megaforce is, in my opinion, though it's not an uncommon opinion, the worst of the Power Rangers shows. It was meant to be an anniversary season and therefore a tribute back to the original days of Mighty Morphin Power Rangers. And therefore, it's basically that pitch and concept again, but without any of the heart in it. It is a bunch of teenagers chosen by a huge alien face to receive the abilities of Power Rangers so that they can defend the Earth from an invading alien force. They don't even really have that much of a unique theme. Technically, I believe the theme originally is like land, sea, and air, but in practice, the theme of Megaforce may as well just be Power Rangers. Their mentor figure is this dude named Gosei, who is Zordon's apprentice that remained on the Earth after Zordon disappeared way back in the early days of the show. And this is an interesting concept, or at least it would be if they had put any effort into developing it. That one sentence I gave you about Gosei 5 seconds ago is basically all that we know about him. They're not cops because, again, it's the original series rehashed. They are definitely more on the superhero side of the scale. They're just not, good, and their upgrade into Super Megaforce doesn't make them a lot better. For those who are not well versed in Power Rangers history, they did this thing for several years where they would basically release 2 seasons of a given show instead of 1, but rather than branding the second season as whatever the show is, season 2, they would just put the word super in front of it. So we got Super Samurai, Super Megaforce, Super Ninja Steel, etc. But the only Super season that actually introduced an update to the visuals of the Rangers was Super Megaforce, where they became pirates. Now you might think that has relevance to the topic of today's video, because if they're pirates, they're probably not cops, right? And you would be right in that thinking, except they never really acknowledge the pirate theming at all. The original theme of the Super Sentai show that this is based on was around pirates. There was a whole gimmick where they were stealing the powers of previous Rangers or something like that, and then Super Megaforce just took the gimmick of the Rangers turning into other Rangers, kept that part, and abandoned the pirate parts entirely. So if you looked at this and got excited about Pirate Rangers, I'm so sorry to disappoint you, that doesn't exist. There is literally no canon explanation or reason why these Super Megaforce Rangers look like pirates. Power Rangers just wasted one of the most uniquely themed suit designs that they've ever had. And so, for purposes of today, I mean, yeah, they're not cops, but just because they're still a lazy rehash of the original and not anything new or fun. Thank God with the next one I get to be positive again, because we move from 2 of my least favorite shows to my favorite Power Rangers team, Dino Charge, who also happens to be the team with one of the most wild conceptual ideas in the entirety of the universe. Now, dinosaur-themed Power Rangers, that's nothing new at all. We've seen that at this point in the show 3 times. But these guys are both dinosaur and battery-themed, and they get their abilities from these little crystals called Energems. Originally, the 10 Energems were just little artifacts that had a lot of power within them and could connect to the Morphin Grid, which is the source of the Power Rangers' abilities. Again, I did a whole video on that if you're curious. But then, they became something a little bit more convoluted. The gems were acquired by an alien named Keeper, who recognized the danger that they posed and appointed himself their guardian. He did a good job at this, he wasn't corrupt or anything, but eventually the location of the gems were discovered by an alien bounty hunter named Sledge. Sledge chases Keeper all the way to Earth. Keeper's ship crashes down on the planet, and this, for note, is about 65 million years before the present day. So to keep the Energems safe, Keeper entrusts them to, quote, 10 of the world's bravest dinosaurs. The gems then bond with the souls of the dinosaurs, are scattered across the planet when the creatures move around, and then are lost when the asteroid eventually causes the extinction of the dinosaurs, an event which was caused directly by Sledge's actions. The gems then slowly turn up over millennia, still infused with the dinosaur souls, and somehow that makes them an incredibly good judge of human character. And so if a human who is pure of heart finds one of the gems, it will bond to them and give them the power to turn into a ranger. So I'm not sure entirely what that is, but it certainly doesn't sound like a police officer. By the way, this is a kind of tangent and not directly related to the purpose of the video, but I love talking about it, so I'm going to because this is my channel. At the end of Power Rangers Dino Charge, it's revealed that if you unite all the Energems in the correct way, it can open up a time portal, and then the Rangers take that back to 65 million years ago and undo the extinction of the dinosaurs, leading to them existing in a branched timeline where dinosaurs never got destroyed, and so they're just still around in modern times. And that's actually legitimately where the show ends. That doesn't get fixed. That's just the status quo. It's great. I love Dino Charge. Is it stupid? Hell yeah, it's stupid, but it's stupid in a really, really funny way. And so I'd highly recommend this one because it is nonsensical. Anyway, they're not cops. They are humans who were magically designated pure by ancient crystals that contained great power and the souls of dinosaurs. So, yeah, let's move on. Move on to Power Rangers Ninja Steel, another one whose concept is just generally insane. We've seen ninja rangers before, but they were ninjas. They were trained in ninja academies and they knew martial arts and were more or less the things that you would expect. The Ninja Steel quote-unquote ninjas were chosen by the actions of a giant sentient ninja star that came from space. Not exaggerating at any point there, this thing is called the Ninja Nexus Prism. It was created by the Morphin Masters, the first civilization to ever access the Morphin Grid, and now it just zooms around the universe, finding planets that need Power Rangers and making Power Rangers. It has some way to predict disasters enough that it can tell what planet it's needed on, and then it just arrives at those planets and basically lends the Ninja Steel powers out whenever and wherever they are necessary. So while this does imply some sort of organizational structure to the Rangers empowered by this thing, I don't think it's in a cop kind of way, helped out by the fact that they are only made in times of crisis and only keep their powers temporarily. We could probably discuss the exact mechanics of this one for a while, but I'm going to move us along because we only have 3 more teams left, and the next one is going to require some discussion. This is Power Rangers Beast Morphers. The Beast Morphers Rangers work for... well, it's definitely an organization. It's a group called Grid Battle Force. And we don't really know what Grid Battle Force is. The purpose of Grid Battle Force is to produce and facilitate the use of an energy source they invented named Morph X, which is basically the Morphin Grid that the Power Rangers use, but in liquid form. Like they bring this other dimensional energy into the real world and turn it into batteries, kind of. In addition to this, they also study inter-universal travel, they have access to a huge range of weaponry both from previous Ranger teams and Ranger villains, and they have their own Rangers in the form of the Grid Battle Force Rangers. They have a ton of resources, and a lot of those resources are extremely dangerous and easily weaponized. In many cases, being weaponized is their explicit purpose. But supposedly, they are not a government group. At least the Power Rangers wiki calls them a non-government organization. I'm not sure where they got that information necessarily, because I don't know if this was ever explicitly stated. I can tell you that Grid Battle Force's leadership does use military titles though. There's a general and a commander in their top ranks, and they also do have some sort of government contract. We see them work with the mayor of the city to provide energy to the town where they're based. And it's definitely worth noting that the Rangers employed by Grid Battle Force are, keyword there, employed. They work for the organization. They're not magically chosen. They're not just teenagers with attitude. They are selected by the group and trained in-house. Granted, a big point of Beast Morphers is that the organization is attacked and the original cadets are kidnapped, and so some other members of Grid Battle Force have to step up and become Rangers, but still, those people who stepped up were employees. So taking all of this evidence, by all accounts, it really seems like Grid Battle Force, and by extension this team of Rangers, is a private paramilitary contractor. Which, wow, if you didn't know where Power Rangers went in the later seasons, I bet you weren't expecting this one. Now, to be fair, in this group's defense, I do think a lot of their shadiness comes more from the fact that this is a kid's show, and so they kind of just wrote them off as, ooh, a secret agency that makes Rangers, and didn't really explore that in detail, and therefore by filling in the gaps, you get this weird conclusion. But it doesn't make the weird conclusion any less reasonable. So yeah, the Beast Morphers Rangers are absolutely 100% cops. I can't really put them at more cops than SPD or Time Force because those two are presumably government organizations, but like, Grid Battle Force is every aspect of cops without the government oversight, which might actually be worse. So I'm just gonna note where their ranking's gonna be, and then we're gonna keep going, because like I said, we are almost at the list, and trust me from experience, the longer you think about Grid Battle Force, the worse they get. We're going to actually stay in kind of cop territory for the remainder of these, which might surprise people because historically, Dinosaur Rangers have been very much on the superhero side, and now we are at Power Rangers Dino Fury. This one occupies a weird little middle ground for our purposes, because the main Dino Fury team that we see is an independent group of heroes that work without any organizational oversight, but they have a history. They get their power and technology from an alien named Zato, who is their Red Ranger and empowers and trains the rest of the team to act basically as a new generation of knights from his home planet. And these ancient knights were not independent adventurers, they were the military for the planet Rafcon. And so while the Dino Fury Rangers we follow are not that military, like, they're trained in the spirit of them, kinda. So, like, weird but accurate comparison, imagine a modern day US Army soldier gets put into cryostasis with a bunch of guns and ammo and gear for 1,000 years, and then gets awakened in the future and trains a bunch of people to be like a present day US military unit. What do we call that? I don't know, but it is a decently accurate comparison to what the Dino Fury Rangers are. So while they're not cops, like, I can't put them far away from cops on the scale since they do have government ties. Ties to a government that no longer really exists, but still, there's stuff there. Though they do drift a little bit farther away from law enforcement when you get to their second incarnation, Cosmic Fury, which I am going to count as independent today, mostly because I wanted an odd number of teams for the final ranking, which you'll see the reason for in a bit. Essentially, Cosmic Fury is a lot like Dino Fury, but just more cosmic magic-y, as the name implies. They lose their original powers and get new ones, which are a lot more space-infused, and their leader dies and becomes something I do not have time to explain today, but can best summarize as the Power Rangers equivalent of a Force Ghost from Star Wars. Also, possibly making up for the weird implications of Beast Morphers, one of Cosmic Fury's main antagonists is a major arms dealer who is trying to start an intergalactic war so that she can sell weapons everywhere for her own profit, and fighting a paramilitary organization definitely gives the team points towards not cops. So we actually end up getting a nice little arc between these two as the team drifts away from their older inspiration and becomes more of an independent thing on their own, and I will reflect that in the rankings. I was surprised when I did my last check and Cosmic Fury and Dino Fury were several numbers apart. And what a nice segue that is into what everyone has been waiting for, the final rankings. I have in front of me the definitive list of which Power Rangers are most cops and least cops. And by definitive, I mean, it's my opinions, but I think they're well researched enough. A brief overview of the criteria used, though you can probably guess many of them from when I was going over each individual series. The biggest factor is organizational structure. Does this Ranger team work for a larger group, and what is the nature of that group? Are they government? Are they military? What's the deal? The other two big determiners that I kept coming back to are who the team fights. Is it criminals, or is it like an invading force or a specific supervillain? That can give us a lot of information. And secondly, how are the members of the team chosen? Are they trained and picked for skills, or are they designated by magic or something? And then, ethics and motives. Time Force and Beast Morphers are both sketchy, so they're going fairly low on the list. They are not lowest on the list, though. We're going to start on the low end of the scale, that being the Ranger team which is most like cops, and then work our way up to the least cop-like. The reason we're doing it in this order is that I think everybody predicted SPD was going to be at this end. I don't think I have to justify this. Number 23, Power Rangers SPD. My reasoning: they are police officers. Next. This one's also easy. Number 22, Power Rangers Time Force. My reasoning: they are police officers, but time-themed instead of having police sirens and SWAT gear on their uniforms, which puts them above SPD. If you can't tell, we're going to run through most of these quickly because I've kind of already discussed them all, but number 21, Power Rangers Beast Morphers. This was just a few minutes ago, but yeah, paramilitary organization, that is close enough to cops that they are third on the list. The next one, though, that one's actually a little bit more surprising because I really am just going to put Ninja Storm as number 20. It feels weird. It still feels weird, but I've thought about it for way too long, and if you put a cop in a ninja uniform, they're still a cop. They train at specific law enforcement academies, and there's a lot of them. I mean, they fit the criteria, genuinely. They're just ninjas as well. Another one that kind of feels weird next, number 19, Power Rangers Lightspeed Rescue. No, they're technically not cops, but they are still actively a government organization. They weren't going to be high on the list. They're above all the official cop orgs, and yes, I like Lightspeed Rescue, hell yeah, firefighters. They are still number 19. 18, Dino Fury. Low on the list because they are one of the few teams that does actively have a government or military connection. Yes, the military connection is to an ancient military on another planet, but there aren't a lot of other teams that boast something like that, and so they are technically close to the most cops. Man, as I'm coming to the end of this, I realize how many times I've said the most cops. Just so we're real clear, I'm doing that on purpose. I know that's not grammatically correct, but I'm doing it because it's funny. Please don't yell at me. Anyway, number 17, Operation Overdrive. This one was a little bit tough to rank, but you'll see that we're getting out of the teams that have a government or military connection in any capacity and getting into groups that have an overarching organization but aren't government related. And at the bottom of those has to be Overdrive for being a privately owned company? I don't know if calling them a company is fair, but I don't know what else you would call them. That ranking might make a little bit more sense when you hear that 16 is Jungle Fury. See, like I said, we're getting into the ones that have organizational structure. Jungle Fury is part of the Order of the Claw, and while the Order of the Claw is more like monks, they have a group, and so number 16 it is. Moving to slot 15, we have Power Rangers Samurai for the exact reason that I said earlier. Their lore is very similar to that of Jungle Fury, but their organization is more ancestry-based. And while I did debate that putting them lower because nepotism in law enforcement, I didn't want to bother with that. They can be 15. Now we have a swing though, Power Rangers Turbo, the only Zordon-era team to be this low in the rankings. And yeah, while Turbo is not really law enforcement, Blue Centurion, man, I mean, he's in like 15 or 16 episodes of the show, and he is just actively RoboCop, so I cannot put any team that works with him on a regular basis in the top half of the rankings. It had to push them down, and slot 14 was where I felt was best. The reason I landed there is that slot 13, the last in the bottom half, is Cosmic Fury. And again, I just discussed this a minute ago because they were last in the last part of the video. They move away from their Dino Fury origins and become more spacey. They still technically have that connection, but they're different enough that they go here. Now we get to one that might be a little bit more controversial. I feel like people are going to argue about this one in the comments. But the reason that I wanted this to be an odd number was that I could have a midpoint. And I decided the perfect midpoint between cops and not cops was actually Power Rangers RPM. The reason that they are landing at 12 is the nature of their situation. I thought about this a lot after recording the section. They do work with the military. Like, they work with the military a decent amount in the show, but it's because of the post-apocalypse thing. I think in any other situation, the RPM Rangers would purely be vigilantes, but to return to that Batman and the Gotham City Police Department comparison, they work with the military of Corinth because they kinda have to. They really play both sides of this scale. They are independent vigilantes, but they also work with the government. And I know that's kind of a paradox, but because of the post-apocalypse thing, that paradox kind of works. And so it sets them up very nicely to be the middle guideline of our scale. If they work with the government or a larger organization more than RPM does, that pushes the team closer to cops. If less so, then that pushes them farther away from cops. Does that make sense? I feel like that was a really good marker, so I hope people agree with me. And since we have passed 12, we're now on slot 11, which is officially the good half. I mean, the not cop half of the scale. At rank 11, I put Power Rangers Ninja Steel. This was still a kind of difficult one to categorize, but I feel like the Nexus Prism is like a pseudo-organization. It's definitely not an organization. It is one sentient space ninja star, but there's a guiding force and a code there which does empower multiple teams. So I don't really have a conclusion to this sentence. It just kind of makes sense intuitively to me, even if I don't know how to put it into good words, but that's how Power Rangers is sometimes. Hitting the top 10 now, Power Rangers Mystic Force. I made a joke during the Mystic Force section that they didn't really fit on the scale because they are warrior wizards, and that's why they're closer to the middle. They are difficult to place. They're definitely not cops. They're on the non-cop or superhero side or whatever you want to call it. This is an informal scale. I don't really care. 10, close to the middle, but a little bit to that side felt correct. Then we get to kind of speed run through a couple of them here because we do enter the Zordon era. Okay, technically not. We enter Megaforce next, which is at slot number 9. And as I well established, the lore of Megaforce is just a lazy rehash of the original Mighty Morphin. So I put them right before the Mighty Morphin Zordon era stuff on the scale. Let's move to slot 8. Okay, well, slot 8 we also kind of skip because slot 8 is the Mighty Morphin Alien Rangers, and as I said in their section, we don't really know their organizational structure, so I'm making good on that promise so long ago and just sticking them also below the Mighty Morphin stuff, assuming that Zordon had the same logic with them. Now we have a benchmark number, slot 7 Mighty Morphin Power Rangers, the original. Are they child soldiers? Yes, absolutely they are, but they're not really cops. They are a bunch of teens with attitude given cool coins by an alien face, and it rules. But why are they slot 7? It feels like they would be higher. Well, now I really have to justify everything going forward, but I think I can do it. And you ready for a great justification? Here you go. Slot 6 is Power Rangers Zeo. I put them above Mighty Morphin because they used magical crystals instead of coins. And I don't know, that just felt less like cops to me. Otherwise, they're basically the same. Come on, that's fair, right? Entering the top 5 now, kind of funny that MMPR was the lowest, or almost the lowest, of the Zordon era rankings. In Space is slot number 5 because of how instrumental Andros was in picking the team. That degree of separation between Zordon and the In Space Rangers, I don't know, it just made them feel more independent to me, and so they went slightly above MMPR. Number 4, the last of the Zordon era, Lost Galaxy. The Lost Galaxy Rangers do some work alongside the government agency of TerraVenture, but they never actually work with them in any capacity, to such an extent that one of the leader-type figures of that organization doesn't even know the Rangers' secret identities. Plus, the Lost Galaxy Rangers were empowered by magic stuff, and as we've established, that's going to push them higher. And now, we're at the top 3. The 3 Power Ranger teams that I think are the least like law enforcement in any capacity. Starting out this with slot 3, Power Rangers Dino Thunder. Reasoning, Dino Thunder is just Western Marvel and DC style superheroes. They have relatively science-based powers, they operate out of a secret lab, they fight one specific supervillain and his mutant monsters that he made. They are so far away from cops in that specific superhero direction that I think they earned their top 3 slot. Slot number 2, Power Rangers Wild Force. Once again, just so far away from cops with everything that they do. They are magically chosen in one way or another, and they fight pollution monsters, not criminals. This was really one where the who do they fight criteria came in heavy, because yeah, pollution is a valid thing to fight and not something that cops do. And with that, we have one team remaining. Was there a little bit of favoritism in this final decision? Maybe. I'm not going to claim to be entirely unbiased, but yeah, the Power Rangers team that is the least like police officers or law enforcement in any capacity is Power Rangers Dino Charge. Much like the Who Do They Fight qualifier was such a big deal for putting Wild Force at slot 2, the How Are They Chosen qualifier solidly landed Dino Charge in 1, because, let me remind you, they were chosen to be Rangers because they were magically designated to be pure of heart by the ancient souls of 10 of Earth's bravest dinosaurs. I know I've said it twice at this point, but please just take a moment to let that sink in, and once you accept that, I think you'll agree with me that they should be number 1. So with all 23 teams addressed, here is the final ranking of how much like cops every single Power Rangers team is. There are some surprises in there, honestly. I would love to hear your thoughts on this in the comments. I mean, I know that's something that YouTubers say all the time, but like genuinely, I'm so curious because I was surprised. Ninja Storm being at number 20 is never not going to surprise me. Man, this was a really stupid video idea. I mean, I'm looking back at this and wow. Do I regret it? Absolutely not. I had a lot of fun recording this and I hope that you guys enjoyed listening to it, but boy, it was stupid. We can all agree on that. If you want a more objective Power Rangers video, do go check out that one that I mentioned a couple times in this video on the exact mechanics behind Power Ranger abilities. I did a lot more research for that one and it answers some very fun questions that you might have about the show. Getting into announcements for today's video, I have a Patreon now. That is still the biggest new thing happening on this channel. If you go check that out, you can find early access to my videos, all ad-free, and at one of the higher tiers, exclusive videos every month. You can find the link to that in the description of this video on my channel page. Also, my username there is the exact same as it is here. There's a lot of ways I would really appreciate it if you took a look. Huge thank you to Ruben Perez, the artist who drew the poses of this character that you've been watching talk at you for the last 45 minutes or so. I always love working with him, and there will be new poses coming from him soon. With that, I will end this video with a little nugget of wisdom for you all. Remember, if Space Patrol Delta tries to talk to you about anything, whether you're innocent or not, don't say anything without a lawyer present.